101 ways to sound like Brian May. In this video we're going to take a look at the different ways to emulate the sound of Queen guitarist Brian May. Now the most obvious way to sound like Brian May is to use the gear he uses, which would be a red special guitar, 3 Vox AC30s, and using a sixpence as a guitar pick. And that's his basic setup, which we'll look at more in depth later on. So if you wanted a red special replica, one of the very first to be brought out, if not the first replica, was the Greco-Japanese made replica, which some people find quite ugly, but Brian May actually used this back in 1977 on Queen's Top of the Pops appearance for Good Old Fashioned Lover Boy. So if you eagle-eyed enough, you'd realise this wasn't the original red special, it was actually the Greco copy. I've actually done a video about this. I'll put that link in the description of this video. But in the 1980s, Guild started producing a replica which looks more in keeping with the original, with the trisonic pickups, the roller bridge trem, and the wiring pickup selector switches in and out of phase, which create that unique tone. If we look at in the Brian May book, it has all the different Guild types. There was different ones. One of the famous ones was this one that was used in the One Vision video, which was produced between 1984 and 1986, which had the Kayla Trem DiMarzio Brian May pickups, and at the time looked very modern compared to the original red special. But these ones are quite hard to come by, obviously limited and quite pricey. And that's where really in the early 2000s Burns started producing, it's probably the first mass produced red special guitar licensed by Brian May. And as you can see, this one that he's holding, but only difference being, well, not the only difference, but the most obvious difference is it has a Wilkinson's trem, which is more in keeping with a Stratocaster type trem than the roller bridge trem. So still affordable, but then Brian May's company BMG took over the manufacturing of this design. As you can see, yeah, slightly different half moon plate, which Burns guitars didn't have, and the aluminium knobs, volume and tone knobs. Funnily enough, mine, when I bought mine 10 years ago, it had the cheap plastic ones on, and later models had the aluminium ones, and they also added the knit and needle knob on the end of the trem arm, which obviously doesn't alter the sound, but looks better, aesthetically looks better. But again, still you haven't got the roller bridge trem, which disappoints somewhat. Now these range about £700 now. Then they started producing the Super, which, as you can see, quite obviously is more in keeping with the original, with the roller bridge trem, the whole setup. Everything about this is more in keeping with the original, the size of the neck, the upgraded pickups and everything. These will set you back about £3,200. Only trouble is, big waiting list for this one. You can't just go in the shop and buy it. You have to wait for it to be built. But probably worth the wait if you're a real enthusiast. There are other companies that have produced replicas over the years, as like the CQ. Again, I reviewed one of those. There's the Guyton guitars. He builds replicas for. Brian May built them for the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, but again, very, very pricey. So that's obviously the guitar that Brian May uses. And oh, as I forgot, that's my guitar on the left, converted with the roller bridge trem by RS Conversions, and that's probably the most affordable way of being able to get a guitar that looks more in keeping with the original, is to get a BMG special and then get it converted, and it is cheaper than buying a Super. Then you're going to need a treble booster. Brian May originally used a Rangemaster treble booster, as did his hero Rory Gallagher, as did Mark Bolan of T-Rex. So I here used the Rangemaster treble booster. He also used the Boss Chorus Assemble, We'll look more in depth of the setup shortly, but I used one of these, which looks quite beaten up, and a Vox phaser. Obviously, especially with Keep Yourself Alive comes to mind straight away with that phaser setting. These again are quite pricey because they're quite rare, difficult to get a hold of, but that's what was being used back in the 70s. So this is a diagram that I've gotten off the internet online, which really explains the best way of explaining the setup, which is the red special. You've got the treble booster, the Vox phaser, 3-way splitter going into 3 Vox AC30s. You've got the chorus pedal into 1, which gives a wet sound. The other 2 have a dry sound. 2 delays there, 800 milliseconds and 600 milliseconds to give you the Brighton rock sound. And that's the basic setup. Obviously not practical for home use. So what are we going to do? Well, we'll look at that later, but we're coming to the different types of treble boosters that you can get. Absolutely millions of different types. You've got these ones by Guild. You've got cheaper versions like this one. You also, if you look online on places like eBay, there's people making their own and selling them. There's kits. Right, with the one we looked at before, the Rangemaster, you can get a kit to build your own Rangemaster. You've got these ones, the Greg Fryer ones, 3 different types there for which emulate different sounds throughout the years. And then you have this, came out a few years ago, sold out practically straight away, so now difficult to get a hold of by Cat, sold on the BMG website, 3-in-1. So you get the 70s sound, the 80s sound and the 90s sound. So again, you need a treble booster really to emulate the sound, and there are millions of different types. Let us know in the comments what your choice is, and it educates people to make an informed decision on what type of treble booster to actually buy. If you can't afford all of that stuff, because it is quite pricey, when I was a teenager, this is a picture I found online of my first electric guitar, which was an Encore coaster with Mickey Mouse, Floyd Rose Trem copy, which at the time I thought was brilliant. It was probably the horriblest electric guitar ever, but I used one of them, and using the Brian May Super Rockstar book, which suggested using a wah-wah pedal, set it halfway. You could actually emulate quite cheaply a Brian May tone. Not exactly, but for a teenager with a Squier Stratocaster and a wah-wah pedal and a cheap little amp, you could actually get somewhere towards trying to sound like Brian May using that setup. But that was one of the suggestions in that book. But in the early 2000s, Digitech brought this Brian May pedal out. So what did this do? Well, as you can see from the advert, you had all of these guitar sounds in one unit. The Keep Yourself Alive sound with the, as it says, rich tape flanger intro or solo with flanging. There's the Bohemian Rhapsody tone, the Tie Your Mother Down sound, We Will Rock You. It also had like an acoustic simulator to simulate the sound of the acoustic guitar. Excuse me. The acoustic guitar on Crazy Little Thing Called Love also emulated the Telecaster tone of the solo. Then it had the delays of the Brighton rock solo and the Deacy tone used on Winter's Tale, and I have pronounced that properly, Deacy tone, because it's named after the little amp which we'll look at shortly that John Deacon made. So it's Deacy, and no comments please saying that I'm pronouncing that I'm not pronouncing that properly. One of the mistakes people made with this device, as you can see on there, you've got out 2 mixer, out 1 amp. Some people plugged this into an amp with distortion and it sounded horrible and therefore thought the pedal was terrible. When I reviewed this one, I went from the mixer out straight into a hi-fi and got quite a good sound out of it, which seemed to be more in keeping. Digitech made a lot of pedals. They've got like the Jimi Hendrix one, there was a Eric Clapton one, loads of different ones, and that was the mistake I felt was made with these. If you're can't think of the word, like an enthusiast, a purist, then a lot of the purists didn't like these pedals. But for, you know, household use and getting an immediate guitar sound, these were pretty good. Only trouble is the price of them, because they're limited now, only made over about a year or two period. The price has rocketed, so where a few years ago you could pick one up for about £120, they're now going between £300 and £400 asking price, which seems quite a lot. Then this was also brought out, the Vox BM1 Brian May amp with a built-in treble booster. This was really to emulate the Deacy amp, which was famously made from an old 70s hi-fi speaker, some electrics from a car stereo, and was powered by a battery. And I think that's the picture of the original one. But this was Vox's way of trying to emulate that. One of the mistakes that people made was to plug the Digitech pedal into the Vox BM1, and it sounded absolutely terrible. You could be forgiven for that because you think, oh, Brian May amp, Digitech pedal, brought out at the same time, both got Brian May written on, plug the two in. This is like a separate unit to be used separately. It's to emulate the Deacy amp, but again, limited production of this one, and the asking price is gone quite high. Where I picked one up for £60 a few years ago, suddenly people are asking £200 and £300 for these ones. Some people didn't like them, but a few years ago on News at 10, on the anniversary of the Bohemian Rhapsody single, as you can see, Brian May uses one. I'll play this. That's your lot. So if Brian May uses them, they must be good. But a few years ago, Amplitude brought out the software, Brian May Amplitude software, which was available for Mac, PC and iPad. And this was really an affordable way to be able to emulate the guitar sound. The PC Mac version was quite expensive. If you downloaded this onto your iPad, it cost about £20, and you just had to find a way of being able to plug your guitar into your iPad, which I've done a video on and reviewed this. Only trouble with computer based software is computers go out of date, they need updating, which is a drawback, and you can't really whack using a proper amp. But this was really good from the aspect you could learn a lot about the setup. It emulated, in this case, 3 Vox AC30s. There's the Deacy amp there, with the little ever-ready battery power on it. And this really gave you an idea of learning about guitar sound. It had all the presets, and I made a list of, because it was made in connection with Brian May's oversight, so it explained about the pickup selector switches that were being used. So I made a detailed list that I'd never actually seen before of which selector switches were used on what songs, and it really gave you an instant portable way of getting that sound. So all you needed was your guitar, your iPad and a set of headphones. You could run it through a hi-fi, and it gave a pretty good sound. And they were the devices that were with it: the 3-in-1 treble booster, the Fox phaser. You also had a setting, so if you didn't have a red special guitar, that it would also emulate the sound as well. Pretty good. I'll put a link in the description, because I reviewed this one, and I'll give you more detailed. But I thought that was pretty good, and for £20 you can't complain. Now another way, more expensive way, is Cat produced these guitar amps. Small. These are the same size as the Vox BM1, which look the size of a practice amp. If you buy three of them, you can really set these up in the same way that Brian May sets his Vox AC30s up. But for house use, you can even use them to gig. They're £750 each, but they're hand built, and from what I've seen, these are worth looking at. That's the amp itself. So it looks in keeping with the Vox AC30, but a lot smaller. And for house use, and even you can even gig with them if they're mic'd up, these were really, really good. I'll put a link in the description to the video about these ones. Cat also do upgraded speaker for the Vox BM1, which I'm told highly increases, can get me words out. It upgrades the sound, it improves it quite dramatically. So I might be getting one of them, and that was only they're only £30, so it might be worth doing that. Then recently, just in the last couple of months, we have the Vox Amplug. I've ordered one of these and I want to review this one because it doesn't look much, but in the reviews I've seen, it replicates quite simply the guitar sound. You can get one of these with the speaker. Now this will cost you about £55. In the ad, it's emulating a Vox AC30 with a built-in treble booster. You've got chorus, you've got the phaser sound, you've got the delay sound emulated here. It also has drum patterns. It's got the We Will Rock You drum pattern, so you can practice along with that. My idea is that I'll plug that into the guitar and through the line out, go through the hi-fi and have it coming out of me massive hi-fi speakers. And I'm looking forward to reviewing that. £55 seemed good. Like I said, I'll be reviewing that when I've actually done the review. When it actually is delivered, I'll put the link in the description. When it came to buying this would be £150, so that makes the little speaker underneath about £100, which I wasn't interested in because it seemed a bit novelty-like, and I didn't see that there would be any use for that. Let me know what your thoughts are in the description. If you have one, what do you think? But from what I saw of the reviews, I just went with the Amplug. Then this was brought out, which I must admit I would quite like. That would cost you just over £400. You've got the cabinet head, which emulates basically a Vox AC30 with a treble booster. Again, I haven't tried one of these out. I've looked at the reviews online and they seem quite impressive. There's Brian May with his, which gives you an idea of the sound. And again, for home use, so you don't have to have three massive Vox AC30s that weigh a ton and are blasting. This gives you it almost like in a practice amp sound. And if you check out again, I'll put a link in the description of this. You can see the treble booster there, the speaker output, and this one doesn't have effects, so you don't get the chorus or the phaser, but again, you could use your own to run through that. That gives you an idea of the size also. So that was £259. If you have the amp as well, that'll just cost over £400, which seems quite reasonable. But again, with the Amplug and with the Vox MV50, these are like limited edition, only selected few. My guess is they'll probably rocket in price in a few years because they'll be difficult to get a hold of. I've ordered the Vox Amplug. Everywhere was out of stock. I managed to find somewhere where they were in stock. They seem to be due another batch, so already they seem to be becoming difficult to get a hold of, so maybe now's the time to buy them, and the price will only increase when things are done limited edition. Now we have this device, which I just discovered just the other day, made by Colombo, which seems a brilliant little device. This is the last one we're going to discuss. An Italian manufacturer has taken the Vox amp plug, taken the insides out, and really turned it into a pedal. These are about £350 if I remember correctly. I'll put a link in the description. There's an Italian video of how he's gone about doing this. Again, if the amp plug is on limited edition, then the manufacturing of these devices are going to be also limited. But it really turns the amp plug into like a solid guitar pedal, which is more accessible for the dials and everything, which seemed like a really good idea. You've got the tap tempo there, which is on the amp plug for the drum beats, and I think the delay as well. I'll know that better when I actually get it. But as you can see, dry, delay, echo, phaser, chorus, so you can like tap in there for the effects, and these sounded really good. Brian, mate, as always, like little devices. There's the Zoom 9002, which I've done a video on, which was used in the early 90s for the Headlong video. That's worth mentioning. I used it on the Battle of the Light album as well. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like I said, there's 101 ways of sounding like Brian May. There's definitely stuff that I've missed out. So let me know what you think in the comments and whether you found this video helpful. So as always, thank you for watching.